Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 17th, and well, crazy times in Washington may start to have their little impact here as we kind of flattened out right at the ABM yellow. We talked about this below 90, definitely looking short as we were starting to see the potential for short reading, which looks just like this, where you have steel crossing below cyan. Orange moves above it as a nice trigger as opposed to just being a flat cross below, and green is below red. In this particular case, you can see that minus 739 to 684. Also, red starting to tilt lower on DOC, so everything's pointing in the direction of some type of pullback. So the question then becomes, well, what are your target ranges going from there? Other than just a complete 50% retrace, we did have this yellow dip that puts somewhere around the 2940 range. We have a whole host of levels in between there. I know when we looked at the 50K before, it had bought that move, sold it up here at the peak as things were starting to flatten out on the weekend shakeout, and you can see that it's in a full DOC spread at this particular point. The only drawback to it was you would have liked to have seen orange coming from below and then above as a stronger mark through, but still, all the signals are consistently lining up for some lower. Now, we've seen this before where you've had this kind of crossover and it's moved across for a little bit, but eventually, particularly if there's a maintaining of that fading of midterm buyers in the green, it usually does what it's supposed to, which is create a downdraft. Here you still have shakeout rising on the NASDAQ, and that's been the bullish argument for most of it that's been keeping things really going, and it's actually also at its peak range right there. And of course the optimism on the euro, we talked about this, the expectation that we would get to this 50% move in that, and that's exactly where they've brought it back up to. Not quite at the top of the range because we've had the dropping Morganacci, but certainly within the preponderance of where the last set of resistance was. So that becomes a key level to be breaking through at this particular point. And the fact that you did not get a steel dip below cyan is still encouraging from a long side. So there's some strong optimism that the resolution for Brit exit will finally come about. We will see. Oil standpoint, oil is just stuck here. I think there's just a lot of questions as to whether or not there's significant enough growth to really suck up the supply that's available, and without any further, turmoil in the Middle East and that, there's no real impetus to drive price higher randomly, and that's why gold has kind of languished just a little bit here in the range. From an intraday standpoint, it was loving it. There was just, we had that continuation from the other day's short. And again, this is that signal here where the orange spikes, steel crosses below cyan, and your green is below red. And that, it can still create some back and forth. And sometimes you'll even see a little bit of pop from it when you're thinking, oh my God, this should be heading down. I usually get excited about that because it's just an opportunity to attack at higher price. And in this particular case, even when you ended up with the dips and the slight buy configuration, they were in these zero reset configurations with steel, and you know that those just don't last very long. So even from taking that situation, you'd end up, just within a couple of bars at the reversal point almost immediately. And did it a couple of times, and then it finally reset right back through here, which would have produced nice buy configuration had the orange dipped a little further. Once the green got above, I was starting to believe that there was a chance for it, but it rolled over pretty fast because we had the dip below the red line, so I was expecting the low to be revisited. So I was just looking for this kind of configuration and separation, and knowing exactly where that was headed. Some of the buy signals were a little bit like this one over here, where we didn't get the dip of the orange completely below, but once we got the green crossover, so it was the start, and then you ended up with gold rising at that particular point. So that one had a little bit more follow through, but this is the one I posted on the Skype chat, and it was just a matter of letting it do it. It actually popped up quite a bit within the weak configuration because of the steel reset. But it didn't take long for it to hit the brakes and cave back down. And because it had already produced this dip below the red line when it popped up. And so once it started to feed back, then it was just a matter of, well, we got to that low, but there was still no turnaround buy, and boom, continued lower. Towards the end of the day, we ended up with this soft little buy right here, and I also posted that this one, we were just waiting for this to end. It hadn't ended at that particular point. I'm like, just be on the lookout for it, because you know that it's going to be coming back. And sure enough, as soon as we got the crossover right there, green fading all of it, and boom. Actually, it didn't go that far, but it held up pretty decent. And then early this pre-market configuration ended up with, again, that same split, and that one's produced a bit more downdraft at this particular point. So I think the ranges are still pretty good. It's gotten a little more narrow right here at the peak, but I think as soon as floodgate of selling opens up at all, that's really going to increase that volatility, because that will exacerbate things quicker. So we'll just keep an eye out for that. It could take a few days, though, given where we've seen with the similar daily readings. So just following it along on the 5K, 50K, as long as they're in the same direction, go with it. As always, trade well. Talk to you later.